Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to our regular council meeting. It's Monday, December the 15th, and from the show in the gallery, you would think we were serving free cookies and coffee tonight, and I apologize, we're not. But anyway, having said all of that, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none then. You've got your agenda before you. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none then, we have a recommendation that the agenda for the December 15th, 2025 meeting of council be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor Brody, all in favor, and that's carried. You've had time to read the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any errors or omissions from November 17th? Seeing none, then we have a recommendation the minutes of the Adelaide Metcalfe meeting of council held on November 17th, 2025 be adopted as printed. Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor McKinnon, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, next up on our agenda is item 6, the Drainage Act meeting to consider report. Council will now proceed with the meetings to consider under Section 42 of the Drainage Act for two petition-driven municipal drains, the Winter Drain and the Richardson Early Drain. A meeting to council is held so that council may review the engineer's report, understand the proposed drainage works, confirm that the report meets the requirements of the Drainage Act, and determine whether the report should proceed or be referred back to the engineer for further review. This meeting focuses on the technical content of the report, including the proposed work, the land, the roads affected, and the assessment methodology used by the engineer. It is not a forum for discussing or appealing individual assessment amounts. Any concerns related to assessments are addressed at the Court of Revision, which follows provisional adoption of the report. As both drains are petition-driven, council's role at each meeting to consider is limited to either proceedings with the engineer's report as presented or referring it back to the engineer for revisions in accordance with the Act. We have a recommendation that the meeting to consider the engineer's report for the winter drain be called to order at 7:10 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Kingma. All in favor? And that's carried. So at this time, I'll ask the clerk if any notice has been given.
Through the mayor to members of council, notice has been given in accordance with the Drainage Act.
You. And next up is our engineer from Spreet and Associates. He's here to present the report for the winter drain. And I'll turn this portion of the meeting over to you and you can identify yourself before you speak, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm George Rakin from Spreet Associates. We are here tonight to present our report on the winter drain 2025. This was a Section 78 request to improve an existing municipal drain. The existing municipal drain there was quite old. It was constructed in 1948 and it was starting to fail due to age. So there was blowouts that was needing constant repairs. Catch basins were not in working order. So we have a report here to replace essentially the main drain of this system. This is in the intersection of Winter Drive and Kerwood Road for people who are familiar there. And so we have approximately 1 kilometer, a little over 1,000 meters of tile. There's currently 8 to 12 inch tile there, and we're replacing it with 14 to 18 inch tile. And we will be destroying the old drain as we proceed with this. There will need to be a little bit of maintenance downstream to the open portion of that drain as well. This project includes 2 county road crossings. Those will both be completed through boring. We have had informal meetings with all the owners to review this proposal in advance. Went over the cost with them and the work to see if there was any addition. We took their feedback into consideration, made any required changes, and we prepared our report based on that feedback. The total cost of this report is estimated at $207,000. And if there's any questions, I would welcome them through you.
Thank you, George. Council, are there any questions regarding the report? Okay. From the public, is there anyone that has any comments or questions concerning the proposed drainage works, the land included in the drainage area, or questions concerning technical or design matters? And this is once again on the winter drain. So Mark, you have to just come up to the front here if you don't mind, and Rob, if you can just slide, yeah. And you have to identify yourself. I know I know. We all know you're great, Mark McNeil, but we need everybody else to know that.
You mean?
Yeah.
I was just interested as to when the beginning, like what month was it starting to, the digging going to start, or do you have that in the plans, or?
Yeah. I'll try to speak to that here. Assuming we get through the court revision and consideration without appeals and we can, keep this project moving, we'd like to tender this with an aggressive timeline. I know there is currently blowouts and it's not functioning well. So we'd be hoping to try to get a contractor out there this spring to try to, beat the planting season if possible. But that's pending no appeals and, contractor availability, but we're going to do our best to do that, make that happen for the owners.
That pretty well answers your question,
Yeah,
Mark.
okay,
You're good?
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Dimension, okay. Sorry, council has two options. The engineer's report dated November 14th for draining works on the winter drain prepared under the Drainage Act be referred back to the drainage engineer for further review and revision, including consideration of matters raised by council at the meeting to consider held on December 15th. Further, that a revised report be brought forward to council for consideration in accordance with the Drainage Act. Or B, that the engineer's report dated November 14th for drainage works on the winter drain under section 78 of the Drainage Act be considered and approved, provisionally approved as adopted and presented by the drainage engineer. What's your pleasure? Councillor McKinnon? Okay. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Kingma. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So could I have a motion to close the drainage consideration meeting to review the engineer's report for the winter drain? Be closed at 7:15 p.m. Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Brody. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, next up is item 6B, the Richard and Early Drain. We have a recommendation that the meeting to consider the engineer's report for the Richardson Early Drain be called to order at 7:16 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, at this time, I'll ask the clerk if there was any notice given.
Through the mayor to members of council, notification has been provided in accordance with the Drainage Act.
Thank you. And we have an engineer, I believe, David Moore from RDOB Engineering to present the report for the Richardson Early Drain, and I'll turn this portion of the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the mayor, again, David Moore's our Dobbin Engineering. I work with Josh Warner, who's the PN, who's stamped on this particular report. Like she said, we were appointed under Section 78 of the Drainage Act, and it was to examine the Richardson Early Drain for making improvements in Lot 3 through 7, and concessions 2 to 4. In the township of Adelaide and Metcalfe. So the work includes replacing the main drain portion as well as the branch D. The map is up here on the screen so that everyone can see. It's a big project. We're also doing some culvert replacements. We got to do some deepening of the open channel portion downstream to accommodate the new tile, as well as some resloping and stuff like that. So this report's done under Section 78. We had an on-site meeting back in February of 2024. Within my report, you'll see there's a list of attendees as well as minutes from that particular meeting. From that meeting, after that, we took the information that we had from that meeting. We did our survey and investigation of the drain. So we did survey from I think it's the Jaria Taylor drain all the way up to Mullaferry Drive, which is at the top end of the drain there, as well as Branch D. We did some drone footage. You could see that the open channel was in a major disrepair. A lot of washouts in that. We also observed a lot of breakdown of the tile, washouts over the land. You could see into sections of the tile drain itself. At the on-site meeting, there was an ask or a request to look at enclosing the portion of the drain through the east half of Lot 4. We evaluated that cost. We got in touch with the landowner, and landowner, due to the high cost, didn't want to go ahead with that. So that part of it was removed. We also looked at the option of twinning the system because that was brought up at the on-site meeting. But based on the state, the age of the tile, the breakdown of the tile, and what the tile size was calculating into today's standards, it didn't make any sense to twin the tile because we would have had to also repair the existing one that was there. So in the end, it would have been cheaper just to replace the tile. So that was that will be the plan that we decided to move forward with. We provided within our report a breakdown of the 3 culverts that were found, the condition of each of them. This was prepared in a draft report dated August 19th. We had a public consultation meeting with the landowners within the watershed on September the 30th. And you'll see again within our report the list of attendees that are there, as well as our minutes that came from that meeting. At that meeting, there was a request to speak with one of the landowners, which was Simon Van Aert. He was not in attendance. He had the biggest assessment, upwards of a couple $100,000. So therefore, in the end, we were requested to reach out to him. We did. He requested a couple of catch basins were removed on the property, but it was quite happy with the work that was being proposed. We also had to get in touch with another landowner who didn't attend it. He was in England or Ireland, one of those places. He wanted his culvert replaced. So that we went back and investigated that culvert, and we come up that we would replace that culvert. So our recommendations in the end, like I said, we'd be doing an open channel clean out, some deepening, some widening, erosion protection through the open portion. We'll be replacing 2 culverts. We're replacing the main drain, tile drain, which is from station 1600 upwards to 4000. So it's over 3000, around 3000 meters of tile drain that's getting replaced. There's going to be catch basin berms put at each property line. And the estimated cost is $831,000 for this. My report will outline some drawings, specifications, and that sort of stuff. And I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Does council have any questions on this drain? At this time, I'll open it up. Anyone on the floor have if anyone from the public want to speak to this drain? Okay. Sorry. We have a recommendation that the engineer's report dated November the 4th, 2025 for drainage works on the Richardson Early Drain under Section 78 of the Drainage Act be considered and provisionally adopted as presented by the drainage engineer. And further, that the drainage consideration meeting be reviewed, or I will do that one separately. So, yeah, do you want to adopt as presented? Moved by Counselor Campbell, seconded by Counselor Kingma, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, we have a recommendation of the Drainage Consideration Meeting to review the engineer's report for the Richardson Early Drain be closed at 7:21 PM. Moved by Counselor McKinnon, seconded by Counselor Brody. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, David. Okay, we have a recommendation that council convene as the Committee of Adjustment at 7:22 PM. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Counselor Brody, seconded by Counselor Kingma. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, the application for consent B 03-2025 owners Emily Fonger and Dylan Shepherd, agent Bradley Hemerick of Bazaar Hemerick McCallum Professionals Corporation regarding the property at 2002 Napperton Drive. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our planner. And it's not Coulter Cahill, it's Ashley Sawyer. We got the wrong name tag there. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair Clark. So as noted, the purpose of this application is for a severance, and this particular one is to sever a surplus farm dwelling from the remainder of the farmlands. So the subject lands have a municipal address of 2002 Napperton Drive, and they're located on the north side of Napperton, just west of Brown Road. Napperton Drive is a county road, and it's county road number 39, and it is classified as a county collector road. The severed parcel is proposed to be approximately 2.72 acres in size and will contain the existing single detached dwelling and one drive shed that will be converted to a residential accessory structure. The retained parcel is proposed to have an area of approximately 47.28 acres and contains various agricultural structures that are proposed to be maintained, as well as cropland in production. The lands are located in what is considered a prime agricultural area, and they are designated as an agricultural area in both the county and township official plans, and they are zoned as general agricultural in the township zoning bylaw. In terms of consultation, the application was circulated in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, and any comments received are detailed in my report. But I would state to date that no concerns have been noted by Bell Canada or by the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, and no concerns have been noted by the members of the public to date. However, additional verbal feedback from members of the public is certainly welcome this evening. The building department provided standard comments that the septic system shall be confirmed to be wholly contained to the parcel it services, as well as in good working order, and that the overhead hydro service from the house to the barn shall be disconnected. County Emergency Services provided a standard 911 addressing condition, as did the county engineer, who noted the owner is required to dedicate lands up to 15 meters from the center line of Napperton Drive to the county if the road's not already to that width. In terms of an analysis, I did go into quite a lot of detail in my report, so I'm not going to read that word for word. But I would just note that there are several criteria set by the province stemming down to the county and the township that essentially limits when a farm property qualifies for a surplus farm dwelling severance. And the severances are typically looked at as an exception rather than as a means of fragmenting farmland. So in terms of lot area and configuration being kept to the minimum size needed for the residential use, water and sewage services, which comes from the provincial planning statement and stems down to us. I will candidly say that 2.72 acres in size is generally larger than is what is reasonably needed to accommodate a residential use, sewage and water services. However, the property is unique due to the setback from the road of the existing dwelling and the location of the existing drive shed. Staff are requesting that the lot fabric with the severed parcel be reconfigured to straighten up the lot lines. Just essentially, this reduces the potential for lot line disputes in the future that we tend to get calls on, even though we have no jurisdiction over. Staff also have reviewed the Ontario well records, and we noted it does show 2 wells on the subject lands. Only 1 well was noted in the application, so we will require confirmation from a qualified well installer to determine which well is actually utilized, and if one's in poor condition and not utilized, that it should be decommissioned, really just for public health and safety. In terms of access, driveway connections from the subject lands to the neighboring property and between the severed parcel and retained parcel will need to be removed, and a new driveway to the farmland will be required to be installed from Napperton Drive, being that's a county road that will be under the county entrance permit. And in terms of minimum distance separation setbacks, the retained parcel contains former livestock barns no longer used for that purpose. And to meet your MDS setback requirements, we do require that any features conducive to housing livestock, so stalls, pens, fencing, that sort of thing, be removed. If the owner opts to retain the features, we will need confirmation from an agrologist that the setbacks can be met. And then on surplus farm dwelling severances, I just would like to note it's also not unusual that you might need a hydro easement, just depending where your aerial wire comes in from the road. It's not always the case, but generally when your Ontario Land Surveyor does your preliminary survey, that's where they will confirm that. If they do need an easement, it'll have to come back before the committee at the future date. So for the reasons outlined in detail in my report, staff are recommending the application be approved with the conditions I have noted, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any questions from council on this application? Okay, we'll circle back to them in a minute. The applicant and the applicant's agent, would they like to speak to this? Nope, okay. So there we go. Okay, last call, council questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna spare you the pain of reading all the recommendations. Before I do that, is there anyone from the public that wants to speak to this application? Okay. All right, then we have a recommendation that the application for consent B03-2025 submitted under section 53 of the Planning Act be granted by the Committee of Adjustments, subject to the conditions that were laid out. 1, through 2, and including up to 22. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Kingma. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, the next application for consent is B03-2025, owner estate of Marjorie Matthews, care of Jeff Matthews, agent Vera Docker from Cohen Hiley Lawyers, and it's regarding the property at 1532 Napperton Drive. So I'll turn this portion of the meeting back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair Clark. So as noted, the subject lands have a municipal address of 1352 Napperton Drive, and they're located on the north side of Napperton, just west of Kerwood Road. Napperton Drive is County Road number 39 and is classified as a county collector road. The lands currently contain one single detached residential dwelling, one barn that's used for 2 horses, a horse pasture area, agricultural lands and crop production, an open municipal drain and mixed vegetation, and the lands are approximately 54 acres in size. The lands are located in what's considered a prime agricultural area, and they are designated as an agricultural area in both the county and township official plans. They are also zoned as general agriculture and environmental protection within the township zoning bylaw, with the EP zone being largely the lands around the open municipal drain. The purpose and effect of the application is to sever approximately 49.40 acres of farmland and merge it with the abutting farm to the east. I would just note when I'm giving the measurements here, this is just approximate based on what we have in our county mapping system, and only a legal survey can actually confirm that once we have that completed. Doing this would result in the abutting parcel becoming approximately 152 acres in size and would lead to a surplus farm dwelling severance lot that is approximately 3.78 acres in size. The existing single detached dwelling, horse barn, and a portion of the horse pasture area are proposed to remain with the surplus dwelling lot. So this particular application has some history with it, so I'm just going to summarize it at a very high level, but we have chatted about this one before. So in 2023, the application was brought before the committee to sever a surplus dwelling lot that was approximately 11.4 acres in size and merge the remaining farmlands with the abutting parcel to the east. The intent was to retain the existing agricultural horse barn and pasture area. And for many records that I've pulled, there was no set time for how long that agricultural use would be retained on that severed lot. Ultimately, the committee deferred that application for revisions to be made, the largest being due to access and lot area. In September 2025, the owner submitted a revised submission that reduced the surplus dwelling lot to approximately 7 acres, again proposing to maintain the agricultural use, and the committee then deferred the application for revisions to be made, largely due to the lot area. So now this evening, the revised application before you is what is proposing to sever the 3.78 acre for surplus farm dwelling lot. They'll maintain the horse barn and small pasture area on that residential lot through the use of a temporary use rezoning for a period of 3 years, which is the maximum time we can authorize under the Planning Act. And following that, the temporary use would either need to be renewed or that structure converted to a residential accessory structure. From a policy perspective, I have laid out all the policies in my report in quite some detail. I would just note they're always meant to be read in their entirety, and I'm not going to reiterate them word for you tonight. But in terms of consultation, the application was circulated in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, and any comments received are detailed in my report. To date, no concerns have been noted by Bell Canada or members of the public. The building department provided standard comments previously regarding the septic system shall be confirmed to be wholly contained to the parcel as services. And they have noted this comment remains, but provided no additional concerns or comments for this revised submission. County Emergency Services did also provide their standard 911 addressing comment, said the county engineer for the road dedication as Napperton's a collector road. The St. Clair Conservation Authority provided fulsome comments in 2023 that they did note still stands. But I'd summarize them by saying that they're generally okay with the proposed consent so long as that farmland merges with the property to the east. Otherwise, they will have different comments to provide, which are expected, and they are expecting to have concerns with safe access. In terms of an analysis, as with the last consent report, I did detail it in my report, so I'll just keep it at kind of a high level here tonight. But in terms of lot area and configuration being kept to the minimum size needed for residential use, sanitary, and water services, staff note that 3.78 acres is generally larger than what is reasonably needed. Generally, most surplus farm dwelling severances can meet this criteria at approximately 1.5 acres in size. And staff's opinion is generally that the horse barn and pasture area should be left with the agricultural lands. As noted in my report, the existing horse barn proposed to stay with the surplus farm dwelling lot does have 2 horses within it, which for compassionate reasons cannot reasonably be moved or separated at this point in time. As such, the owner is proposing that a temporary use zoning be placed on the property to allow the horses, as I noted, to stay for 3 years and essentially reassess at that 3 years if an extension needs to be granted or if it's appropriate to convert the structure to residential at that point. In terms of access, driveway connections between the severed parcel and retained parcel will need to be removed if they exist. Generally, we leave this condition open enough so that it's to the satisfaction of our public works manager. And in terms of minimum distance separation setbacks, we will need confirmation whether the horse barn stays on the farmland or on the severed lot, that it meets the minimum distance separation setbacks from the lot line. And this is generally something that's completed by a qualified agrologist. So for the reasons outlined in detail in my report, staff are recommending that the application be removed with the conditions in my report, notably that the lot area be reduced to 1.5 acres in size approximately. And I understand that the owner and their agent may be requesting the condition number 5 be removed, which would essentially be approving the severance at the 3.78 acre size they have requested. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. At this time, I'll ask the agent Vera and Jeff at the same time if you two either or both have remarks you'd like to make. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come back with a revised application. We are requesting the removal of condition 5 with respect to the sizing of the lot. We'd also like to revisit the septic system condition just with respect to the fact that it's an existing septic system, and there's going to be no change to the septic system. So having it reviewed, especially due to the delay because it's winter time, and this is something we are trying to get completed as soon as possible. But that's probably secondary to the condition relating to the size of the lot. We did want to, again, I think we spoke last time about a more holistic viewpoint towards the application. In this case, specifically with the sizing, there is actually 2 septic systems on the property. On the application we submitted, we did outline the 2 septic systems. And so the current proposed signing of the 1.5 acres would actually not accommodate the location of the 2 septic systems. Where we are proposing the lines basically would accommodate that. And then the other major area is obviously the barn, which we feel is an accessory dwelling and to be utilized with the property that is the best and intended use. As noted in the report, that barn will not be beneficial to the adjoining farm owner that would be amalgamating that property in. So it would be kind of a waste to transfer it over. The requirement to negotiate the use of that farm on an ongoing basis for the 3 years, which is add complexity and more time to the farmer who's already acquiring more land than he had originally intended with our original application. So it's going to require revisiting that with the farm owner. So we're trying to keep everything as cohesive as possible in view to what we are intending to do. And then going back to the fact that in our opinion, the viewpoint is to avoid fragmentation of farmland, and we are proposing something that will allow you to to join an abutting farm and create a 156 acre, I believe it was, right, Ashley? 152 acre farm, something that will not occur if this is not feasible at 1.5. So something that's not going to occur, you're going to keep a small farm as opposed to adjoining it with a larger farm if you allow it at the size that's being proposed. So I think that's an important consideration that we are allowing larger farm. It's going to force that larger farm, which is one of the main things that is being pointed out in the report as a consideration and one of the main objectives of preserving prime land. The other thing we wanted to point out with the sizing is that as proposed, the services, the hydro, bell, internet are actually outside of that blue line. So it would be prohibitive to move the services. So again, that would be something that would become prohibitive to even proceed with the proposed blue line, blue outlined severance. So again, we would submit that our proposal is something we would prefer to proceed with. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add? You're good right now? Okay. All right, council, any questions, comments? Councilor Brody.
Oh, here's, sorry. I agree with the 3.78 acres. That is it's a beautiful property. The barn and the pasture and stuff's not gonna work with a budding land, for just farmable acres. Um, I move that we do the 3.78. The septic part of it, somebody has to inspect those anyways. That's part of the curriculum, so that's not an issue.
Okay, well, if we can hold off on that motion for a bit, is there any other comments or questions from council? Councilor McKinnon?
Through the chair to Jeff Likely. I'm a visual person, so could you just point out on the proposed severed lot where the 2 wells are for me so I can see where they are? And the septic system as well, if you will, please.
So the one septic system, the original house is 1964 over here, so that the septic system is right in this low area right here.
Okay.
And then the second one, when they did the addition, goes all the way to the barn, so it covers right. That's where right there, it's much
Perfect. Okay.
The well is into the well.
So the one septic system for the house would be outside of the blue line, the proposed lot line that the planner has suggested. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other council questions or comments? Okay, is there anyone from the public that wants to comment on this application? Okay, seeing none then, I can move back to you if you want to still make that motion.
Yeah, through the mayor, I'd like to move that we allow the severance to be 3.78 acres. I know it's a little more than what the county guidelines state, but I do think this is a unique property. There's tree lines, there's pasture, there's Again, it's a beautiful property, so I think we push the 3.78 acres. I have no problem with that.
To address, so
The other condition would be condition number 17. I have talked to the chief building official about this potential removal of that before, and he's not in a position to support that. So I would not recommend the removal of the septic condition.
So, my limited expert knowledge is typically when we do a farm severance, like a residential surplus farm dwelling, you still have to have the septic inspected just to make sure it works, and that's just protocol. So, hang on, let me just reread this.
Yeah, that's correct, and that is a consistent approach across the county.
Just for clarity then, not to cause trouble, but so would we actually need to, um, normally, isn't it just to make sure it's in working order? Okay.
Yeah, so typically I kind of spell it out a little bit more because I like the conditions to be clear on what they actually need to do. But generally, some other places will leave it to a septic inspection report confirming location. That's exactly what that condition means in a shorter term. But I just like to lay it out so that when the septic inspector gets that condition, they know exactly what they need to do.
So is everybody okay with that? Okay. All right, so we've got a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Brody that the application be presented to approved as presented with the exclusion of, was it number 5? Yes, number 5. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Campbell. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, if anybody wants to leave the gallery now, you can, and then we'll just take a 2-minute pause here. Merry Christmas and all that jazz. Okay. Okay, we're back in the meeting here now. We have a presentation next up. Our item 7B on the agenda is development charges bylaw update from Watson and Associates, and I'll turn this portion of the meeting over to Byron Tan, and he's joining us virtually. So Byron, welcome to the meeting, and I'll turn this portion over to you. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Just not sure whether my presentation will be shared or if you require me to share my screen.
So Byron, I just gave you co-host abilities if you want to share. We can do either, but it's probably easier if you do.
Will do. Just give me a sec here. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here in front of council and the members of the public and staff to provide a presentation on your development charges bylaw and essentially provide you a little bit of an overview of what we've been undertaking over the last few weeks, which basically culminates into this presentation today and kind of showing you our findings as per council's direction in a previous council meeting. So purpose of today is provide you a bit of an overview of, really your DC bylaw. And really what we were tasked to do is to explore a few options, for the municipality or namely for the township. And that circles around the idea of these farm help houses or these, residential buildings within the farming landscape. So part of our mandate, or at least what we've been retained to do, was to take a look at a survey of comparative municipalities and really come back to council to provide you a bit of the, our findings as well as potential options in terms of how you want to proceed with your development charge background study. Now, as you can see, here's a number of items on the agenda, but if I just move on to the next, you could see right now the purpose of the DC review is that the township is currently exploring options regarding the treatment of its housing of its farm workers, really within the context of your development charges bylaw. So if you recall, we undertook your bylaw a few years ago, which really, encased in it, a number of conventions on charging singles, townhouses, apartments, as well as the non-residential sector. Within that bylaw, we also identify a number of definitions, discretionary exemptions, etc. Now, as part of this review, we were asked to take a look at a number of lower tier municipalities, essentially as part of your neighboring counties, to really investigate to see how do they treat, farm workers, houses as part of their DC bylaws, and whether they're charged or not. Because under the Development Charges Act, as well as any bylaw within Ontario, everyone pays a DC unless the province mandatorily exempts them or you as a council provides exemptions or discounts. So that's typically how the DCs operate. Everyone pays unless it's said otherwise. Now, part of this evaluation is to help inform council and provide you with, really an overview as to, again, how other municipalities handle this in this type of charge. And then, options for you to proceed, whether it's considering updating your current bylaw or waiting until your next update for your fulsome DC review. So what we've done, at least over the past few weeks, is again through working with township staff, we've identified a number of municipalities for inclusion as part of the survey. And again, the purpose of that was to determine how they treated farm help houses, or also known in the industry as maybe bunk houses. And through these municipalities, we looked at Middlesex County, Elgin, as well as Lambton. And there's about 26 municipalities that we surveyed. So we went through all of their bylaws and policies, associated policies is contained within their bylaws, to see how they, what type of exemptions do they provide and how would they treat, these types of farm uses. So of these 26 bylaws, 26 municipalities, 19 of them had development charge bylaws, or at least those that are active. Of those 19 bylaws, a large amount, so 14 municipalities include farm-related exemptions. And you are included as part of that 14 as well. So you provide a farming exemption overall, which again is dictated by the definitions included as part of the bylaw. However, interestingly, as we narrow it down further as to what constitutes part of their farm exemption, any use related to residential was excluded. So that means if it's a bunk house or farm help house, they were still charged the DC. And all of these farm-related exemptions, again, they all identified wording that excluded the residential portion of those, of those units. So what does this mean in terms of council, or at least your options? So as you know, right now, based on your current development charge bylaw, you are currently charging these farm help houses. They are treated right now as a standard residential development. And I believe typically, and again, maybe staff, can weigh in on this, but I believe any types of developments under this category are right now being treated as a townhouse or a multiple development. Again, it is based on the built form of the unit, but I believe that is what is currently being imposed as of right now. And they do pay the full DC across all services. Now, with this, current regime, again, if you were to maintain this, there is no change to your current bylaw. It's basically status quo. Everything remains as it is. And and based on one of our findings, it does maintain consistency with all of the surveyed municipalities, again, within that sample. And just to note that as part of this option, if you were just to maintain status quo and really do nothing as part of your bylaw, it does not require you to add any more, funding of exemptions, or at least taking care of these foregone DC revenues that you otherwise would have had to fund from other non-DC sources, right? So any dollar amount that you elect to not collect for really does not go towards any capital projects you're choosing to fund via DCs. And therefore, you don't have to worry about funding it now, either in the back end or the front end for these foregone DC amounts. And through
Excuse
discussions
me.
with staff. Oh,
Sorry, Byron, we just have a question and I apologize for interrupting you.
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Just Councillor Brody has a question.
Through you, Sue, to Byron. So basically it's saying 0 municipalities exempt residential farm uses. But had they actually had this issue come up? How many of them? I don't think very many. So it's easily said that 0 municipalities exempt residential farm uses, but I don't think they've had this issue thrown at them like we have.
Before you
Great
answer, Byron, just to follow up, in Middlesex County, nobody has had this issue come up, but my question to piggyback on Councillor Brody's would be in the Chatham-Kent area where they would be more inclined to have workers 365 days a year working in greenhouses and such. So maybe you can speak to that.
Absolutely.
Leaning
Great
to-
questions. So through your worship, you're right. I mean, in terms of the survey, again, we, for all of the different municipalities and given the amount of time we had, it was merely just a review of their bylaws and what's included. Not sure exactly what type of positions they're in right now in terms of, applications coming to the building official's office, or, what they're facing in terms of, the environmental climate of these types of developments. So that aspect was not included as part of the analysis. However, and then to the mayor's point, in terms of Chatham-Kent, so I did their development charge background study about 2-3 years ago. And with respect to their, farm help house, or what they consider what's called a bunkhouse, they do have a separate charge that they provide. So they basically provide a development charge for a per bed basis. So basically on a bunkhouse, and then they calculate on a per bed. But that was embedded again within the calculations and how we went through that process.
Sorry, can you explain that again to me?
Yeah, so they don't. So the Chatham-Kent has a separate charge for farm help houses or bunkhouses, and it's a separate category, and it is charged on a per bed basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brody, follow up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking to myself, that'd be interesting to see what that actually is. Like what that. Mhm.
Okay, continue on, please.
Okay. So as I said, this is just one of the options based on conversations with township staff. Another one potentially may be perhaps looking at, undertaking, say, a partial exemption of the service. So currently right now, the township does impose DCs for, services related to a highway, which is your roads and public works, fire, parks and recreation, as well as studies. So one of the items that we were discussing with staff as a potential, whether it's now or later on when you undertake your DC background study, is to perhaps, identify them as a specific category. So if you are a farm help house, or a bunkhouse, what would you classify as, within the residential categories. Maybe perhaps we maintain what you're currently charging them at, which is the multiples, aka townhomes. And then one of the things that, again, that was being discussed was potentially perhaps we look at it by a service category. And maybe perhaps, again, not without any, some type of assessment of exactly what their use is in terms of municipal services. But perhaps maybe they do need, 100% of the fire services as you grow in fire. The fire department has to respond over there. On their downtime, they also use the parks and recreation services of the municipality. They contribute to your studies in terms of, growth related, whether it's, planning related studies, et cetera. But maybe they're not using 100%, of the roads, right? A lot of them maybe are just using the sidewalks and going to town, picking up groceries, and not necessarily, providing impact to the, to the roads in terms of, driving via cars. So perhaps, maybe apply a percentage. And, one of the ideas was perhaps a 75% DC exemption on just the services related to a highway portion based on their potential limited use of that service, while everything else remains, the full payable. Now, with this option, again, a couple of caveats. One, again, any exemptions provided by the municipality. Again, you now have to, fund those foregone DC amounts via other non-DC sources to help pay towards your, growth-related capital program. And then as well, there may be, some monitoring aspects that will be required over an extended period of time, as some applicants, they may, choose to apply, say it's a farm help house. But however, maybe perhaps, down the road, they convert that into a regular residential use, therefore foregoing, some of the DCs that would be payable. Again, that may be an extreme example, but these are items that, could pop up in the future and still has to be considered by the township. And then just to follow up on that partial exemption, how that would look like. The top portion of this page, you can see is your current charges. So assuming that they are multiples, right now they would currently pay about $10,410 per building. With the proposed, with these changes of reducing that services related to highway piece, it could come down, as low as just under $5,500 per farm help house. Again, this is just one example of an option that could be undertaken by the township. And then the last thing was a full exemption, right? So if the township elects to, you could just simply add an exemption to your bylaw and do not charge farm help houses. We would have to define what they are, make sure you put in a proper definition within your bylaw. But again, similar to option 2, there may be some potential misuse of this, hopefully not, but it's something that the municipality will just need to monitor to ensure that you don't have anyone applying for this and then converting it, down the road and not pay a DC. Or again, a full exemption will then require the municipality to now fund the full foregone amount from other non-DC sources. So if you're exempting, $10,000 per unit, then, that $10,000 needs to be considered from other sources.
Okay, excuse me, Byron, we just have
Yes.
a question here. Councillor Brody, go ahead.
Through you, Sue, this might be a one directed to Johnny possibly, but like these numbers isn't the one we're talking about. Weren't they gonna get hit with like a $45,000 DC charge?
Yeah, great question. So the DC was calculated for this specific example, or that's the scenario here. Since they removed the structure, they got a DC credit, and then they were charged multiples for each of their units. So I'm not sure the exact number, but they were charged 4 individual DC charges, but they were given a credit for the building they took down, but they were also charged a DC charge at the county as well. So that total would equal that similar amount.
Yeah, I do believe it's.
But it's a one-time at the county, right? It was probably it was 4 times the 10,400, and then probably the county was 5,000 and change, I'm guessing, to come up with the 45.
I believe the county is around 5-ish. But they also received a credit for the building they took down, and then the county DC times the 4 units they constructed was the total charge, if that makes sense.
So just my math here, saying that first option 2 is a 75% DC exemption. But then if you use that one single one, it said $10,000 basically, right? And if you cut it down, it was really only cutting it down to half. So that's my math's only a 50% DC reduction. Am I reading that wrong?
Byron, you're only discounting the highway portion, correct?
That's
Oh,
correct. It
you're
was
piecing it out. It's
a
not the
75%
entire pure
discount on
number.
that's right. It's only on the services related to a highway.
Okay, I'll say some stuff later.
All right, Byron, go ahead. Sorry.
No, anytime. So then just the last few slides here. So, with those proposed amendments to the DC bylaw, if you are to look at option 2 and 3, which either has a partial or full exemption, one of the things that a few things we have to do. I mean, first off, we'd have to add a definition to the bylaw of what a farm help house is. And we do have some from, other municipalities that, we can glean on in the absence of you not having a definition, say within your, zoning bylaw, let's say, or other documents. So you can see one, here's a sample on the screen. Again, not to say that this is the definition, but it is a potential sample for you, where it's ancillary to a bona fide ag use on the same lot as the farm building, and it's provide living accommodations for the persons employed, whether seasonal or full-time. And then as well, then we would add the exemption, clause within the DC bylaw. So it's either that 75% or whatever percentage, based on a category, or simply just a full exemption. Again, if you were to go down options 2 and 3. Now, in terms of the additional consideration, I think you've this kind of been mentioned through the conversations here, but Middlesex County does impose DCs at the upper level, and any items that you undertake here does not impact their bylaw, so they would still be in effect with their current policies as well as their current charges. So, and you can see here's the county's current charges right now. And then lastly, again, with just reiterating, with staff's recommendation and speaking with the township, they do recommend option 1, at least for now, in terms of, remaining status quo. It avoids creating any potential precedent, introducing new residential farm exemptions. It may be a cascading effect, again, just through conversations with staff. There may be some reducing of this risk of misuse, as I mentioned, with, applying for this type of unit and then changing use later on, circumventing paying a DC. And then as well, with any exemptions, it reduces the municipality from having to pay for the uncollected amounts via using your property taxes or user fees, right? So as I said, any reductions do need to be funded from other non-DC sources. And I did mention that it is consistent with surveyed municipalities, but to the councillor's point, I'm not privy to, what type of applications or, the environment that they're in, and, who's coming to their table and requesting certain conventions. So really, as part of this, I mean, council, you're happy to, field any questions and, how you'd like to proceed moving forward. As I mentioned, regardless of, how you want to begin, I mean, one of the things that we've discussed with staff was to incorporate an assessment of this through your next DC background study, where we could review the treatment of farm help houses and maybe even potentially establish a separate category similar to a Chatham-Kent. And then as well, if we are undertaking a DC update, there'd be a number of DC legislative changes that do need to be considered. Some of you may or may not have been following, the media, especially through the province. But, there were a couple of bills that were released, earlier this year, namely Bill 17 and Bill 60. So if there are any changes to your bylaw, we would have to consider it, but as part of the overarching review due to the changes to the Development Charges Act. So, it's not simply just opening up the bylaw and then just, changing some calculations. If we are having to do a study, there's a number of conventions that need to be considered, and they're kind of on here for council's review. I mean, I'm not going to go through every single one unless you have a specific question, but anytime you open up the bylaw, there are a number of items that need to be reviewed and amended before council can consider any updates. And that concludes my presentation. So again, I know I've been asking questions, but feel free to ask any more.
Okay, thank you, Byron. Are there any further questions for Byron? If not, then could I have a motion that the development charges bylaw update presentation be received? Moved by Councillor Kingma, just to receive it, moved seconded by Councillor McKinnon, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, Byron, thank you very much for your time, and we may be circling back with you at some point, okay?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thanks for taking the time. Have a good night.
So are we gonna discuss this a little bit more today, or are we gonna? I'd like to discuss it a little bit more. Like,
Sure,
we didn't
okay.
need Byron on, just like.
Yeah, no, we don't need him
we
on
don't
for the
need-
discussion.
I-
Yeah,
Can I start then?
sure, go ahead.
So I don't like option one. I think everybody knows how I feel. This is way too much money for this kind of issue that we have in front of us. And I'm not agreeing to say to go to option three either. Like, there's gonna be fire services needed. There's gonna be, but where, I guess, do we come in a number two level? And I did like the idea of looking in to see what Leamington, Chatham, like all, because you got to look at this. This is not the same to me. Like, they're talking like townhouse units, right? Because they're trying to lay 4 DC charges on the property we're talking with, which is only one single building. That's
Is it
like
a-
they all basically live together and share a kitchen. So they're getting nailed like a townhouse when there's a one building and 4 separate townhouses in there where there's 4 kitchens, 4 like everything. This is totally different.
I think there are
right?
4 kitchens in them, are there not? They're
they all
separate
separate
units,
units?
yeah, they're
Okay.
separate units.
But I mean, I don't think you can blanket it the same being on a back road, on their farm, on their, I guess I want to have more discussion and more input, like what those other townships are like, what they're charging basically.
Councillor Kingma, you wanted to add something?
Thank you through the mayor to council. And I guess Morgan specifically, I don't know if you'll have an answer, but can DC waivers be offered in a KIP program?
It's a good question.
The county is proposing that
Yeah,
starting in
and-
January.
I think it's possible. I just don't know how, like what it looks like. And so through our KIP year-end report, I can investigate what that looks like and bring back a bit of a process. The reason why my brain's kind of on fire a little bit is that depending on how we adjust the CIP program, it might be quite a drawn out process. Because it essentially comes together very much like an official plan amendment. There's a public meeting, there's a large process, there's notice periods. So I'm not sure if that's something that council wants to entertain with this particular discussion, but it's certainly something we can look at in the future. And I will absolutely include an analysis as part of my year-end report based on that question.
I think that would be worthwhile as it will add to our list of options, I guess you could say. I would also suggest that if DC waivers for this very specific category were on offer, then we could go with option 1, strictly speaking.
Any other comments from the other 2 councillors? Councillor Campbell, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily
want to every time have the discussion either. I think that probably bogs us down a little bit, but it would still be interesting to see what it would look like based on it. I do think that when you look at some of the housing available and the increase in it, I think if I have no problem leading the charge. If no one else does it, we can absolutely lead the charge. Because I think to build some of these units is actually better living conditions for all of them anyway, for anybody who's working. So I think if we can find a way that fire protection services, growth studies, I think that has to stay in. But some of the other ones, I'm very much interested in how we can reduce those.
And I think that's how, when the conversation started, we said, like, sometimes you have to be the bold one, right? And that's why we undertook to do the study. And we're not saying yes tonight, and we're not saying, because we haven't landed on the model that we like yet. So, anyway, Betty Ann, sorry, did you want to say something?
And my question would be, should we go through MPAC and see if they would consider categorizing them differently than a residential unit?
Councillor Campbell, go ahead.
Yeah, because then because the one concern I do have that would mimic Byron's is the misuse. Like, do you build it and then just convert it? Could you put something on there that if it changed its classification, then you collect the full DCs at that point?
Let
You'd have
Johnny
record.
speak to that, because there is an administration piece around whatever, if we land on a change. So Johnny, go ahead. He's my bean counter here.
Through the mayor to Councillor McKinnon, a great point with MPAC. So staff did reach out to MPAC regarding this to understand the tax treatment of that. Based on what they saw, usually they saw farm help housing that was all year round was typically charged a residential tax rate, not farm, because it's for all seasons. So there were some DC bylaws that I've noticed was dependent on how MPAC assessed them. So that's what led me down that rabbit hole. But MPAC, it seems like if it is all seasons, it is assessed residential. Again, typically, you just highlight the word typically there.
Because at the end of the day, we don't want the common tax base to pick this up for the benefit of one farmer or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think, there's been a focus across the province of trying to be creative with housing strategies. And also, we're trying to support Canadian businesses, and what can we do to backstop that to make our economy stronger? And this is a bigger conversation, and this is just one part of it. So, would it be prudent at this time to have a motion to ask staff to bring back a report with more fulsome a review? And then that would give people such as myself time to reach out to a couple ministers and see if we can bend their ear a little bit. I think that's our job basically, and I think we should consider that. Councillor Kingma, go ahead.
I agree, Your Worship. I think we have to find out what the staff really thinks is going to fly here. But I wonder if we could narrow down their workload by focusing strictly on KIP and seeing if that angle will work. Now, will the rest of council agree with that, keeping option one if and only if the applicant can apply for a DC waiver for that particular category? That way we're not burdening the broader tax base, and we're going ahead with our user pay philosophy as well. Okay?
Councillor Brody, go ahead.
Through you, Sue, to Garrett's comment. I don't, my brain's not wrapping around this KIP thing enough to, I'd have to have something in front of me. I just don't know totally what you're meaning there.
I think it could be one component, but I don't think it should be the only component. Maybe that's a fair way to put it. Because we want to be fulsome in how we address this.
Well, just one other comment. I don't know if we'll see more of this in our township because we're pretty small, and how many But I do think this is gonna be something that's gonna happen more. And you don't want to deter that either, because you want healthier living conditions for these people to work, and you do. So I think we need to do a little more homework on this and yeah.
If I can jump in through the mayor to council, I do like the Kipper Community Improvement Plan concept because it does generally leave our development charge bylaw program fairly static until the next development charges update, which would include a whole bunch of things that Byron listed on that page. The question I have around the community improvement plan is funding levels and exemption numbers. We're looking at, I think I heard $50,000 in terms of DCs for this particular development. If 50% exemption is what wins the day, that's $25,000 out of what I would say is a small funding pool within our community improvement plan. So to align some of these things, we want to increase our community improvement plan program funding amount. And the reason why I do like that idea is because council now has a decision around what community development looks like, and then it can fund the exemptions through a program that's already allocated in the budget. So I like that idea. So I can bring back a report in January or very early February that outlines what that process looks like, what the timelines, what funding amounts might look like, given certain scenarios that we've seen in the township previously. I just, given Byron's data, like topical data, it's not a deep research or look into the history of how these decisions or things are boiling up. But I am curious to kind of understand or measure what trends, like how many of these are we going to see in a year? Because again, the grant program, the CIP program only has so many funds in a year that's available to it. So we'll have to make interesting decisions if we're seeing more than one per year, for example. So these are just kind of some of the considerations that are flying through my brain as I think about trying to balance what council is looking for here.
And we have the county to deal with too, right? Because they charge, right? So we'd have to have that conversation with them too. But we've got a little bit more work, I think, to do on our end. So sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah, I don't mind carrying this conversation forward with the county as well to see if there's something that they would be willing to do or something more creative we can pull off for council. But I do like the idea if council wants to ask staff to bring back a staff report, to bring back more fulsome information, to look at what the CIP program could do, what funding levels we might see, if there are any other trends in Ontario for this type of work. I do appreciate, Councillor Campbell's comment about raising the quality of living for folks that are working on our farms. So yeah, there's a lot of good questions here that I do think we should dig further into.
Someone like to move that? So it's not just going to be the SIP, it would be a fulsome report. Betty Ann, you'll move that? Seconded by Councillor Brody, all in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Okay, next up is 7C, a presentation, the options analysis of Municipal Service Corporation 2B Development / Rural Impacts Canada, and this is Nicholas Laraway. Am I saying that right? Laraway?
Laraway's right.
Laraway's right, okay.
How's everyone?
Right, good, I'll turn that over to you, Nicholas, okay?
Hey, Nick,
Wonderful.
before you jump into the presentation, I just want to do a quick preamble. So council knows that we're looking at consolidation of industrial lands. It's really to target development, the future long-term viability of the community, but also to focus our efforts into a particular area. A few things I've heard from council over the last 6 to 18 months are generally around risk mitigations. What does our debt capacity look like? What are risk mitigations that we can put in place to offload any potential negative impacts onto our tax base? I forget how I came across Nick and Lindsay, but I think it was because I heard from somebody at Roma conference, how amazing they are at doing this work. It was generally focused around affordable housing, types of municipal services corporations. I reached out to them to discuss if they were able to or willing to maneuver their program to focus more on industrial development activity. And they went as far as discounting the initial step, which should have cost us about $10,000 plus tax. And they charged us $5,000 because it was an interesting project to them as well. So Nick, I do want to say thanks to you and your team. It's been a pleasure so far working with you. I'm excited for council to receive your presentation this evening and to keep moving forward. Over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it. So I'll share my presentation here. I'm going to try to keep the time good here because I know everybody's getting late. So here we are. So let me just, it's been a while since I've used Zoom to be blunt with you. There we are. Okay, everyone's able to see the presentation all right here? Wonderful. So my name's Nick Laraway. I'm a senior project manager here at 2B Developments, Rural Impact Canada, sister companies here. Today, I'm going to go over some of the work that we've done previously and talk to you about some municipal service corporation elements that we're beginning to look at with the township. So beginning with, look at all these transitions they threw on my PowerPoint for me. So starting with the findings from our program under our Municipal Options Impact Analysis program, the MOA, going over some industrial lands and how they can be served by Municipal Service Corporation. Then we're going to talk about our program itself and how it typically looks. Then MSC information sort of section, just talking about MSCs in a general sense, and then a Q&A. So municipal service corporations are tools for development. They are essentially, well, they're exactly what they sound like. They're municipally controlled corporations. So they're a corporation that's owned by the municipality, but has an independent board and an independent operational staff. Typically, occasionally you'll see them loaned with staff municipality, but typically you don't always see that. It's very diverse. So starting with the work we've done before. So the township participated in our MOA program earlier this year. This was a bit of a preamble to the preamble, if you will. It goes through a variety of municipal challenges. It's kind of like a getting to know you sort of phase, if you will. It's helps us have a high level understanding of municipal challenges and opportunities, and we present sort of feedback. And this is what we do when we encounter this. This is what we've seen when we see that. So it consisted of two elements. So a summary report, which was here's the problems as we've kind of spoken with you about. This is what we're identifying, and some of the root causes of that. So taking a step back. And then our options analysis is, well, here's what we're going to do about it. It's so it contains high level overview. So general speaking, what people do, and then specific actionable items based off of what we've found. So from that, we found the industrial land consolidation was the highest priority. It's what Morgan reached out to us for to talk about. And it's the key, over and over again with consultation with yourselves and some community members. That's what we kept on seeing. From that, we saw that assessment growth was identified as a key driver of the long-term fiscal sustainability. So diversifying that fiscal assessment, and that the township needs a coordinated approach to bring these industrial lands online, that this is a massive undertaking, as Morgan likes to say, planning to swing big. And to do that, we want to make sure that we're planning properly. Some of the other topics that we recognized as key challenges was housing, but not the primary focus, lack of available rental housing, senior housing, some worker housing to some degree. And then also regional cooperation, especially with your neighbors down there, Strathroy Caradoc, can be important to the development process and is also a priority. So within that options analysis, we present a variety of solutions and options to all three of those key features. So I'm just going to go through those. We have a slide for each of them. So as I mentioned, consolidation of the priority areas were consolidation of industrial zones, bringing new employment lands online at that specific identified intersection, increasing the non-farm assessments, protecting farmland. That came up over and over again, that we want to centralize everything that we're doing so it doesn't just pop up randomly throughout the community and take away from farmland. And then, yeah, so reducing the sprawl, as I mentioned there. So our focus number one is industrial land. So the problem essentially is lack of centralized industrial lands, seeing it spread among the municipality in various areas. I know there had been an issue previously. So within that, we saw in a general sense, adjusting zoning, creating an MSC for development, which I'm going to talk about a bit later, and then creating a strategy that is consolidated and focused, so to take it forward. And then specific recommendations was going to be that MSC for the industrial lands, which I'll speak about, collaboration with Middlesex County and some of your neighbors on industrial lands, and then DC charge relief and property tax incentives, among a variety of other. These are kind of the ones that we chose that were our personal favorites. So here, the second recommendation was focusing on housing. So again, adjusting zoning to centralize and incentivize certain areas. So in the Kerwood area, and sometimes on the municipal boundary, pursue municipally owned projects. That's what we do. 2B Developments is primarily a project management firm that supports municipally owned projects, and then leveraging these provincial and federal grants to actually get that housing done. It's a lot actually less expensive to build housing than a lot of people think, and those grants are there to support. So within the specific recommendations, we talked about decentralized water and wastewater systems, so using systems like a Newterra system, which acts as a mini municipal system, creating and communicating the incentive structures that are made, talking about DCs earlier, that sort of thing, MSCs for housing, and then developing communities in the existing villages that promote the aging in place. And our final focus was focusing on the relationship with Strathroy. So essentially, we phrased that as non-optimizations of lands in close proximity to urban areas. So for that, we saw seeking to collaborate through regional districts, servicing, long-term service agreements with Strathroy, as has been mentioned, and then joint MSCs for infrastructure. So municipal service corporations can have multiple owners. It's a very strong incentive if everyone's owning the same piece of the pie and they're owning the same kind of corporation and they're moving forward together. So within that, a joint MSC for infrastructure, especially for the industrial lands, leveraging decentralized and water and wastewater systems on that area, the boundary area where servicing might not be available. They're not going to extend servicing. You can make your own, and optimizing lands closer to those urban areas and creating even an intermunicipal development framework and development plan, making it a part of a larger focus, takes away some of the politicization of it. So within this, upon delivery, we spoke a bit further about MSCs and how an MSC can support the industrial strategy. This is the reason for our engagement in a lot of ways. So MSCs support the industrial lands because with, how do I say this? They can increase debt capacity. That's really their primary focus. When you have a municipal service corporation that's structured in a certain way as a government business enterprise and you meet the criteria, you're able to have the debt that entity takes on off the municipal balance sheet. So it doesn't show up and you're free to develop and do as you will without the ARL kind of crashing down on you. There are strings attached to that, of course. There's no just such thing as a debt corp, but it can be incredibly liberating for a municipality to transfer an asset at its mortgage or something like that to a different entity and free themselves up while still getting the benefit of that development. MSCs also allow for faster and strategic decision making. So the board is business discipline and expertise, and they're focused. So typically they have a focused staff. It's the only thing they do instead of one of multiple things that they have to compete through priorities. There's always something that arises that prevents long-term projects from really taking off in the way that we envision them to when we set them forward. So this helps eliminate that. And this also helps to eliminate, or not eliminate, but reduce at least some municipal risk and increase the fiscal performance. So it separates out that development and the focus of this one entity and this one sort of project with the wider municipality. The MSC sort of fails or there's something that goes wrong, you're protecting yourself from the risk that it could, spiral into the municipality. So our program, pardon me, I think I dropped through. So our MSC program is typically around housing. We see it a lot where a municipality develops a housing project that's $10 million and that completely wipes out their repayment limit. And they have no space to do anything else. You know, they want to redo the pool or they want to do any other municipal project that they see. So we see that a lot, but it's also applicable to industrial lands, economic development. We see it a lot with infrastructure too. Innisfil has a great MSC that's been focusing on that topic because, as I'm sure you know, upgrades to municipal infrastructure can be millions and millions of dollars and really wipe out a municipality. We see it for waste management, tourism, recreation, and culture. Really anything that the municipality has the power to do, they are empowered to do themselves. So our program is a bit of a three-phase approach, or kind of how we see everything. So phase one, this initial engagement and the upcoming engagement that we've spoken with Morgan about and staff, is sort of all the pre-work to actually doing all of the legally required work for an MSC. So aligning on the purpose, what its scope is, what it should be doing, how it's going to go do that, what its governance structure is going to look like, the accounting and financial framework, all of that sort of development work. That's what we're planning on doing over the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months, through a series of memos and, you know, piecemeal kind of decision making and information. So within that too, we have a large educational component. So the idea is that we have, you know, we explain everything and kind of build upon it up to a decision-making point so that council and staff feel incredibly well informed to make those decisions as they're needed, and, you know the pros and cons of each decision and have a full kind of understanding. So that's part of what we're doing in this upcoming engagement. As a part of it too, it builds towards the actual MSC development. So making all these decisions is pivotal to have the business case, the asset transfer policy, and the community consultation, but particularly the business case. We've seen that municipalities that don't really sit down and decide on the scope of what they want an MSC to do kind of get what we call a bit of a kitchen sink MSC, where they try to put everything in and do everything, and then it does nothing. And that's not, that's not effective and that's not helpful. So, as we move out of this engagement, we move into, our MSC program of development, creating these three mandatory activities, and then the governance model as well, because we find that that's one of the most important things. Councils typically we see are a bit afraid of a runaway MSC that, is controlled by the municipality, but is not. And so they're afraid about the control of it. And then phase three is positioning the industrial lands and the MSC for federal and provincial funding, looking at stuff like the site readiness program, looking at the Build Canada Strong program that we're seeing come out of the federal government right now, and actually just getting it built, getting the industrial lands, getting the paving done, and, the water system in and everything there. So I just want to talk a bit about MSCs in a general sense. So what we have here is the kind of the main stages and the mandatory requirements of an MSC. So the business case, community consultation, and an asset transfer policy are the only three mandatory requirements that the Ontario government requires before you can incorporate. But we also see the needs assessment, the preliminary work, and the governance structure as being, necessary tools to be done. So the needs assessment and preliminary work is essentially what we're focusing on at the moment. So within this, the preliminary work, we have establishing the foundation. So we're finding the priorities, narrowing our scope, doing an overview, moving through accounting standards. Are we going to be positioning the MSC to be off book or not? What's the revenue going to look like? Essentially doing all the pre-planning, and then going through the accounting and financial framework. So looking at the accounting, the governance structures, responsibilities, and the other everything else that comes with it. So Bill 60 was mentioned tonight, and this aligns quite a lot with what we see the federal government and the provincial government with Bill 60 doing. So Bill 60 is not particularly about MSCs, but it really is very focused on public consultation, accountability principles. It does incorporate some MSC work, but that's primarily with Peel. But it is showing a wider trend by the provincial government and the federal government to have municipalities sorted out by themselves and give them the tools to do so and the legal mechanisms to do so. But they want to be a little bit hands off, and that's what we see with MSCs, is really municipalities putting themselves in the driver's seat to make this all work. So I moved through this a little quick, and it's a little bit tough to do so. Like MSCs are a massive topic. That's why we have a 6-month kind of proposed engagement here, because there's a million aspects to it. There's a million details. So I know there's going to be some questions. So if I can answer those to the best of my ability, and provide clarity where I can, I'd like to take this time to do so.
I'm just gonna let Morgan jump in here for a bit, Nick.
Perfect.
Yeah, and Nick, thank you for your presentation. And I guess there's a couple notes I want to hammer home a little bit is,
Mhm.
you know, we've seen a couple examples in Middlesex County, for example, where a municipal services corporation was created, but it wasn't really fully understood how, why, or what it was doing. The respective councils of those service corporations might have been caught off guard in terms of how they were developed. So a program like this would give this council a full understanding of the decisions that it's making, how the shareholder agreement is going to be set up, how the board of directors will be set up, who's making what decisions, you know, who's on those boards. For example, could be a composite board where you have some local politicians, some science engineers on there, or municipal representatives. You know, that's really what this program and these memos that Nick was talking about was really going to do is, you know, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. So here's one bite now. Let's understand and decide what that looks like, and then let's write it down. Then what that does, it actually offloads having a law firm, for example, develop the MSC from start to finish, and it become a very legal animal, where this kind of brings a little bit more plain language into the conversation so that we can understand the decisions that we're making. So all that to say is that there's still a component where we would need, if council chose to do this, if council chose to undertake the municipal services corporation and then proceeds with its incorporation, there is a legal component where we would need a law firm to do the incorporation and the documents for us. The other thing I want to stress too is this municipal services corporation, as we go through the program, council might say something like, you know, assessment is our final destination, but we might be bringing jobs to the area where we don't have housing stock available. So maybe we need a partner nearby where we can leverage this MSC to attract funding opportunities, so that that partner nearby can start to build the housing for the jobs that this industrial park could potentially bring. Yes, we're prioritizing assessment, but we might not always just get assessment. We might also get some jobs too. So essentially what this program allows us to do, have very thoughtful conversations, discuss what partners could look like, and then start to bring those partners to the table before we finalize the program, for example. So I know that was a question from council at one point in time. How can we leverage this conversation to bring partners to the table? That's how we can leverage this conversation.
Yeah, and maybe to Morgan's point too, that this initial engagement allows for a bit of a fully formed idea. So when you bring the partners in, you want to make sure that you have an idea of exactly what you want them to be doing, what their role is, and that you're not being, you know, necessarily still sorting that out. You know, I know that control is a big focus, and by doing this, we know exactly what we want and where everyone else fits in, and so that can, yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it without vamping on it.
Any questions from council at this point? Councillor Kingman, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor, maybe Morgan might have the answer. An MSC is okay for the commercial corridor as well, and for the industrial park. You want one MSC, right?
Yeah, ideally, and Nick, maybe you can help me respond to this, but we've talked about this in the past. We have a commercial corridor that's doing commercial things, potentially some future residential things. We have an industrial park that's going to leverage potentially the same public utilities, for example. We can structure a municipal services corporation to do both of those things at the same time under that economic development umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we usually see MSCs being used for is the municipality kind of develop something, and then it's transferred to the Municipal Service Corporation for the ongoing management of it. So within that, I mean, it would essentially become a management MSC at that stage. So the industrial lands would be developed, held by the MSC, and the same would be true for the commercial corridor. So the commercial lands are developed and then held by the MSC. So absolutely, you can do one, you can do two. It depends on how you structure it, really, and what the board composition is and your ability to staff it with people that you want to be doing that, frankly.
Thank you, Nick. Does that answer your question, Karen? Yeah. Okay. Follow up?
Yeah, and these are questions that likely don't have too many answers to at this stage, but I'm wondering how much of our staff is going to be on standby for administrative support to get one of these going. That's a big deal to me. At some point, I think the CAO is going to be stretched pretty thin. That's my speculation. And at some point also, an MSC is going to have a president and a CEO. Is that correct as well? And that will increase the cost and its associated administration plus insurance and so on and so forth. So we could be racking up quite an expense operating one of these, which will raise water and wastewater rates. I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, maybe just as a quick kind of comment on that. The idea with MSCs is that they cover their cost. They're revenue generating vehicles, and that their costs are covered either entirely or in part by their activities. So for the rents that they would charge for the industrial land to an industrial tenant, the idea is that would cover the cost of staff, and that would cover the cost of that insurance that you mentioned and that sort of stuff. It's not uncommon to see municipal staff working for an MSC on a part-time is kind of the wrong word, but on a certain basis where, the allows for the cost savings of you have the people and you can move them around. But yeah, the idea is that it's a corporation in every sense of the word, right? It's profitable. It's designed to be profitable. That's part of the business case. If you go to the Ontario government and say, I want to make a business that, isn't profitable in my business case, they're going to not really accept it.
And it is a good question, and Nick, it is something that you, Lindsay, and I have talked about in length. Is what does resource allocation look like of an MSC? And I think what we landed on at the very beginning is it's very low footprint. It's essentially a paper exercise.
In a lot of ways.
Until assets start being transferred and then start being maintained, or things start being developed and then being transferred to the MSC.
Yep.
And then in terms of the growth concept, as the industrial park does grow and does see activity, construction activity or otherwise, that new assessment offsets any new costs incurred, to your point, being a revenue generator. Correct? That kind of summarizes what we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's but even outside of the assessment growth, the idea is that the municipality builds this thing and it goes and exists and acts as the benevolent corporation for the management and development of industrial lands, to the set municipal priority that it's given, which in this case would be, development and management of commercial and industrial lands. So, it acts as this sort of benevolent body that is out there. But the idea is that it covers its costs just through its revenues without having to rely on municipal ongoing funding. That's the objective.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, go ahead.
So then to that point, and Councillor Kingma's comments, I guess from your experience and knowing that it's mostly residential, but from your experience, at what point does that shift from, okay, it's going to be profitable, but right now it's municipally expensed and entirely dealt with by staff? At what point does that shift from being entirely a municipal project to something that actually pays for itself?
Well, it depends on the business plan, right? Every business is different, and every kind of corporation is going to be a bit different. We have a project, we're building an MSC for housing, and the the recognition is that it's not gonna pay for the MSC on the first development, but on the second and third one, it will. It depends, and this would be part of the discussions that we'd be having, through this engagement is what does this actually look like? At what point does it become profitable based off of the financial feasibility analysis? That's part of the ongoing discussion, but I don't really have a number or anything like that. I just can't do it until we have a full understanding of, how big the industrial lands are going to be, what we're going to be able to tenant the lands out for, all of that stuff. The ideal is that in building your financial feasibility, you add the cost in. That's what we typically do. We add, 10% or, $80,000 or something like that to cover someone's salary. But it just depends. And that's part of the work that's ongoing. And maybe to an earlier comment, that's part of the work that we take on and that we do with, supervision from staff instead of staff having to go and do that themselves.
Okay, any other questions for Nick? Counselor Kingma, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Nick, I heard you mention the town of Innisfil. What kind of governance structure or do they have over there?
I'm not 100% sure. I just know it's a water and wastewater corporation that they did to develop some of their lands for housing and it was municipal water and wastewater infrastructure and street lighting. So they had an issue where they weren't going to be able to afford it themselves, but by building the MSC just went and turned on all this land and turned on all the servicing for it. They built the pipes and paid for itself through fees and it's charges to the clients. But I don't have all the details of the Innisfil one. It's been a few weeks, a few months since I've read their business case. But it would be a board typically is what I would imagine it would be.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah, so thanks, Nick. I'm just gonna get into quick next steps. So we're not here to get council to make any decisions. Essentially, we just wanted council to hear and understand what the program looked like, the benefits of it, the steps along the way, and what some of the decision points we'll get to, including a financial analysis, of course.
Yeah.
Early in the new year, I'll bring a staff report back to council after reviewing some of the questions here and getting a little bit more finite on the details or answers. And then I'll work with council to seek direction on whether or not we proceed with this program, which would lead into the potential development of a municipal service corporation. And the only thing along the way is, although we want some certainty in council and stability in that decision, there is a decision point along the way where council might just determine this isn't for us. We walk away from it for the money that we've spent program, which I think the full 6 months was identified as about 25,000. I think. Nick, does that sound familiar? Yes. Okay.
Sounds about right. Yeah, sounds something in that ballpark.
So that's next steps.
Yeah. Okay, so at this time then, if there's no further questions for Nick, I'd like to thank you for coming to present this report. It's been interesting work, that's for sure. And yeah, have a Merry Christmas and thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time, everyone. And if you have any further questions that come to you later on, Morgan has my contact information, and feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk about this extensively, either through email or in a meeting.
Okay, we appreciate that, Nick. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Okay, we have a recommendation at this time that the options analysis of municipal services corporation present be received. Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Brody, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so before you, you have the consent agenda. And is there anything you want pulled from that consent agenda? I think we're just going to take a 2-minute recess. Sorry. Okay, now that we've dealt with that issue off the books here, or off the record, all right, so consent agenda items 8A through 8M. Is there anything anyone wants pulled out of there? We do know the sad news about the 11% increase with the OPP, but we'll get to that later. If not, then we have a recommendation that items 8A through 8M listed under the heading of consent agenda for December 15th, 2025 be adopted as recommended. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Counselor Brody, seconded by Counselor Kingma. All in favor, and that's carried. Okay, correspondence. First item up, municipality of Brook Galveston. They've made a request for financial support for their arena floor replacement. Anybody want to speak to that, or Counselor McKinnon, go ahead.
I don't think we have enough information for them to be requesting 75,000 for their arena. I'd like to know more of input, how many kids go there, for instance, for hockey or soccer or ball or whatever. So I would just like more information before we could commit to 75,000.
Counselor Brody, go ahead.
Through Sue, I'd like to, I can't say we can support this now because we just finished our budget but I would like to send a letter back requesting, like, but Betty, it's a little more, I know it's a $2 million, they're looking at a $2 million arena floor project. Right, so, and there is quite a few, like, I know we use it all the time. But because our budget is done, but I don't think this project is going forward for a bit yet. So if they send us something back, say midsummer, before give us lots of time for the budget, maybe be a little more. I like what Betty Ann said, but I'd like to send something back to them for future consideration, basically.
Okay, so would you like to make a motion that you direct staff to reach out to the municipality of Brook Galveston to acquire more details on the participation level of Adelaide Metcalfe
And
residents?
timelines and that kind of thing.
And Morgan, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate council's intent on this one for sure. I guess I struggle with the concept generally of funding a community center in another jurisdiction. Because quite often Adelaide Metcalfe residents will attend other community centers. You'll see Glencoe, you'll see Strathroy, you'll see Middlesex Center. So the conversation is challenging, and I do understand that. But where does it start and where does it stop? Community centers are also considered tourism attraction types of things within communities. There are options to work with the province to go after funding or other types of monies available for these types of projects. Sometimes the province needs to see strain on the system to step in. So it is a challenge. Speaking to my colleagues, they also do caution the same type of exercise because our residents do go beyond more than one border. So I just want to caution council in that respect, it is a big can of worms to open.
And if I might add, the Optimists provide a great soccer program in the summer, and we don't charge. And I'd be hard pressed to find 200 kids playing soccer out of Adelaide Metcalfe. A lot come from surrounding municipalities as well. So we all do our bit, that's for sure. Councillor Kingma, did you want to make a comment?
Thank you, through the mayor to council. I think Brook Galveston is awesome. I think we should see what we can do. But on the other hand, we don't know to what extent they've exhausted their searches for support. Is there any information on that? And if they, by our standards, have gone through a significant process looking for funds, then I think we can entertain some support for them, but I would like to see a regional reserve program where everyone who's being solicited for funds puts in a very transparent manner the amounts that are being donated by each benefactor. And I want to see where that money is coming from.
Morgan?
And I think there are other opportunities for new revenue streams, and it could be placed on the minor hockey associations, for example. I know there are no more borders, so kids are going to Huron County, for example, and we could have kids in our own backyard now going to South Huron, which now we might be having the same conversation with South Huron. So, you know, it could be a new revenue stream through organizations that recognize or know where the kids are coming from. And if they're paying certain fees into certain rec centers where those kids aren't also having tax-paying parents that are located there, you know, it could be placed on the organization. So I do wonder what, to Councillor Kingma's point, I do wonder what conversations are happening if they're absolutely stuck. It is an idea I've heard for many years, to be quite frank, and it's often kicked around because it does make sense to ask that question. Why wouldn't you reach out to your neighbors who are also leveraging your community infrastructure? It is a great question. And to Councillor Kingman's point, Brook Alvinson is a great community and they have a great administrator, they have a great council, but these are tough fiscal times, especially given everything that we got going on as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always the option to defer this as well. Councillor Brody, you had something else to add?
I think it's getting a little deeper than we need to, but I think we should just kick it back, tell them we made our budget already, send us something this summer and relook at it again, reconsider.
And in what manner they intend to pool the funds.
Yeah. Okay, so is that a clear enough direction for council? Do you need a motion or you're good? Motion, okay. So, Councillor Brody, you'll move that we defer this at this time and we'll revisit it in the last quarter of next year based on additional information that's provided to us, as well as any other levels of participation from neighboring communities and or government agencies. Could I have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, all in favor, and that's okay. Next one up is a letter regarding bail reform, the city of Welland. Councillor Kingma, go ahead.
I support this one. I think we do have to strengthen bail and sentencing provisions in general as a means of showing some support for victims of crime. I think we've gone way too soft at the federal level.
Any further comments? Councillor Brody, go ahead.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a pretty disgusting situation that one refers to, but anyway. All right, so could I have a motion that we support 9B? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Kingma, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, 9C, a request from the city of Brantford to support a resolution regarding Professional Development Day. Have it on Municipal Election Day. A request from the city of Hamilton to support a resolution on the impacts of Provincial Bill 60 on tenants in Hamilton. A request from the town of Ajax to support a resolution to solve the crisis and winter homelessness program support. A resolution from the municipality of Calvin requesting support on strengthening self-defense protections and addressing rising home invasions. Councillor Kingma.
Thank you. As a man I would say my impulse is to protect my family, so I think anyone who wants to make life really, really difficult for a violent intruder should have some license to do so.
Okay, so would you like any other comments on that? Would you like to make that a motion that we support that resolution? So moved by Councillor Kingma that the request for resolution on 9F be supported. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Campbell. All in favor? Okay. Okay, next item up is a request to support a resolution from Northumberland County regarding the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence City initiatives. Resolution request from the Township of Selwyn on curbside recycling eligibility for nonprofit organizations. So just to give some context around that, you'll notice the bins with the red lids now. Your churches will have those, your food banks will have those, people that don't necessarily have the same amount of garbage, but those, everyone's in one category there. All right, the last one is a request to support a resolution in opposition to Bill 68 and the Conservation Authority consolidations, the various agencies and municipalities. Councillor McKinnon?
I'd like to support this. The province already possesses the authority to establish regulations and standards. And so at our last St. Clair meeting, we would like to see the municipalities push back on the province and not lose our voice. We would propose that, or I guess I kind of got ahead of myself here, but we would propose that we push back to the province to maintain local, independent, municipally governed watershed-based conservation authorities rather than the large 7 municipalities that are, or watersheds that are being amalgamated, and that we send the information to the Ontario Minister of the Environment, Steve Pinsnow, our MPP, AMO, Roma, Indigenous communities, all municipalities, and Conservation Ontario.
Okay, that's a motion.
Yes, please.
Okay, is there a seconder? Or do you have a seconder? Okay, any further comment? Councillor Kingma?
Yeah, thank you. Has the staff looked at a map closely to see where those boundaries are? And are there still two in our township?
Yeah, our municipality will fall under 2. They're taking 36 down to 7.
Yeah.
Which.
And we're in two.
Still in 2. We're still, currently we're Sabo Bayfield and we're St. Clair, and I'm sorry, I don't have it at the top of my brain here, but there's 2 distinct ones out of 7, and so we will still straddle 2. Sure, go ahead, Councillor Brody.
Through Sue, I do think there needs to be consolidations. I think each conservation area does the same thing. I don't like the idea of having 2 in our one township. That should be a change. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm more in support of some more consolidations, to be honest.
Really?
I think the only thing I'm gonna add is, the interesting thing about the governance model is they're now gonna be provincial appointments, so you won't have a local voice.
No.
So that's because I think with a lot of the organizations, there is room to streamline, and there are, like the backroom operations, paperwork, cloud permitting type of ideas where there can be efficiencies, it can be made.
Yeah.
So I can see both sides of the discussion here. Anybody else have any comments? Sorry, my nose is running. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Kingma, that we send a letter to the MECP and affected agencies, including Indigenous folks and our member of Parliament, provincial Parliament. And it's in reference to totally opposed to moving ahead with moving the 36 down to 7, correct? Okay. All right, so that's on the floor. So I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so now I need a motion that council receive and file correspondence 9C, D, E, G, H, and that's it. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor Campbell, all in favor, and that's carried. Next up is our staff reports. We have a site alteration bylaw update, and we'll turn this portion of the meeting over to Michael Barnier, our legislative clerk.
Through the mayor to members of council, you'll remember the draft site alteration bylaw being presented to council on November 3rd. Asked for getting council feedback and we make those adjustments. So just quickly, the bylaw was introduced to establish a consistent enforceable framework for regulating the removal of topsoil placement or dumping of fill, the alteration of land grades within the township. And we highlighted this isn't anything to do with agricultural, not to affect anything under normal farm practice. It was just another tool to use. We have seen a few issues where we had no tools to apply to the situation. And it prevent just orderly development in general. If anyone starts development outside of a site plan control, this is how we regulate it. So staff have revised the draft site alteration bylaw to reflect council's feedback, including the addition of a haul route considerations within the purpose and intent section, the inclusion of a new definition for peer review, updates to inspection provisions to reference the use of third-party review, and there was a couple of additional comments, and additional clauses were added to ensure cost recovery for peer review services, and to clarify that agricultural activities not consistent with normal farm practices may require a site alteration permit. So the problematic one, to me, revising it was comments by Councillor Brody about if they're doing too much work. We don't have the resources to police agriculture, and it wasn't an intent to police agricultural activities, right? But what we can reference, if it is going outside of normal farm practices, it's either going to be affecting a drain, and we'll go through the drainage process. We can apply this, though. We have added language if it's going outside of a normal farm practice. Again, we don't want to be policing that, but if it comes to our attention, definitely. If it's a larger one, we have some tools to look into it. So those revisions are outlined specifically throughout the report, but I am asking, the recommendation is that council approve the site alteration bylaw. And happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Mike. Are there any questions on this bylaw? Seeing none, then we have a recommendation that council approve the site alteration bylaw. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Campbell. All in favor? And that's carried. Next up is 10B, the 2026 fees and charges bylaw, and I'll turn this over to our treasurer, Johnny Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through to council. Just continuing with the cost recovery framework, reviewing the fees and charges bylaw on an annual basis is an important exercise to ensure we are recovering our costs. The goal is to align fees as much as possible with the true cost of services being provided. So managers do review the respective departments' fees, and we do look at including CPI, true staff time to complete the work, and comparisons to neighboring municipalities as well. A summary of the proposed changes are attached to the report, in addition to the entire fee schedule which follows. So the proposed fees would be effective January 1st, 2026. I would kindly ask council to consider the recommendation as outlined in the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Johnny on the fees bylaw? Counselor Kingman, go ahead.
Through the mayor, forgive my ignorance, I don't know what an alternative solution review is. What is that? It's on there for $577.
It cost him $500 for you to review that question. Let's be under building because oftentimes applications keep coming back and back and back, and there is the staff cost to that, is my understanding. Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know, but Mike might, but I know that was developed through building.
So I don't know specifically, I'll have to take a look at it, but what we're doing, a lot of those cases, as we contract Middlesex Center out, these are Middlesex Center fees, and we've added some of them in. There are some different ones that I haven't seen in practice. There's a non-compliance fee as well. That's a different one that most municipalities don't have. But yes, they are Middlesex Center, but we can definitely get back to council on the specific answer. But that's a good question.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it's what I mentioned though, okay? All right, so are there any further questions on the fees and charges bylaw? Counselor Campbell, go ahead.
Through you, just to check in on like some of these costs, I know they're going up by 2%, but like a half-ton truck went up far more than 2% in value or things like that. So just in terms of like assessing if that's actually on a cost recovery basis, like how often do you do that versus just using CPI?
Yeah, great question. Part of the exercise, and Coulter might be able to speak on that as well, is comparing to neighboring municipalities as well, seeing how we compare. So getting to like, is that fee exactly cost recovery? I would say that's probably very difficult to arrive at a full-on answer. But we do strive to understand that based on how our neighbors are charging that as well. I'm not sure if Well, you can speak to, you know.
I think Johnny actually answered that really well. We don't use it too much, just mostly on like boundary roads if we have to build back to a neighboring municipality or something along those lines. The odd entrance, if we install it for the homeowner, we'll bill it back. But as Johnny said, it's more cost recovery, and we are aligned, I think, with most municipalities. Johnny and I did check on that, so. A great question. We can do a good review next year.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the fees and charges? Seeing none, then we have a recommendation that the 2026 fees and charges bylaw be approved. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Counselor Brody, seconded by Counselor Campbell. All in favor? And that's carried. Johnny, you're up again for the 2026 draft budget. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Clerk. Through to council, staff presented the 2026 draft operating and capital budget last Monday, December the 8th at a special council meeting. Staff received direction to bring forward the budget bylaws for consideration of approval tonight. There has been no public response or feedback received to date. The overall 2026 budget results in a 5.08% tax rate increase for a total 2026 municipal budget of just over $9.8 million. The recommendation is to approve the 2026 budget and tax rate bylaws, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Johnny on the budget? I know we had that special budget meeting and the number was confirmed with the 11% increase from the OPP. So not to throw them under the bus, but that does impact us. So I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. Some municipalities, you know, it's a big pain point, $2 to $3 million. So within Middlesex County. So not good news. Councillor Kingma, go ahead.
Yeah, through the mayor, just a general comment. I'm really thankful that Andrew and Brody were on the budget committee. I think it was great that you represented the public's voice in that process. I just wanted to mention too that I think in the broader context, I think Canadians are severely overtaxed, but it tends not to be from the municipal level. It's the province and the federal government that are looking to keep us under their thumbs. So I hope the public understands that we're responsible for perhaps 10 to 12% of their overall tax burden. I hope that provides a bit of context. And the other context, of course, is that we're building our township. This is a future-oriented budget. It's going to provide opportunities in the future for our children and grandchildren. They're going to find meaningful work in this township. And I can unreservedly endorse this budget as a consequence.
Very good. I think everybody echoes your comments, that's for sure. Any other comments? Seeing none, then we have a recommendation that the 2026 budget and tax rate bylaws be approved. Moved by Councillor Brody and seconded by Councillor Campbell. It better be you guys. Right? All those in favor? There we go. That's the real test. Thank you. That's carried. Okay, next item up is number 10, the tile loan rating bylaw for Seldom Rest Farms, Family Farms, and I'll turn this portion over to our treasurer, Johnny Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through to council. This report just highlights the standardized process of the next steps to approve the rating bylaw for the tile loan for Seldom Rest Family Farms Limited. Back on October the 6th, council received a report for the tile loan application. Since then, an inspection was completed by our drainage inspector, and all documents have been reviewed by OMAFA. The next step in the process is the approval of the bylaw and direction to sign and authorize the tile drain debenture and offer to sell documents to be submitted to OMAFA. I would kindly ask council to consider the recommendation as outlined in the report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Johnny. Are there any questions? I think these are pretty straightforward and we don't think the province gives enough, but maybe we tried that and that didn't work. All right. So if there's no questions, Johnny read the recommendation. So could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we will go into closed session now. So anyone in the gallery, we have to ask you to leave. Okay, so we'll just take a break here for a minute before we go into closed. Oh, I know, sorry. Okay, we're now going to go into closed session. We have a recommendation that council adjourn to closed session at 9:20 p.m. pursuant to section 2392 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the following matters: litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, specifically outstanding fee collection. And a position plan, procedure, criteria, instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or be on behalf of the municipality or local board regarding the servicing agreement between Strathroy Caradoc and Adelaide Metcalfe. So we'll see how long this one goes. Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder to go into close? Moved by Counselor McKinnon, seconded by Counselor Campbell, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you.